The first time anyone saw him, he was already standing in the wrong place. It was just after sunrise in the low hills of eastern Namibia, and the township had not yet shaken off the cool weight of the night. A cluster of tin rooftops shimmered faintly with dew, and the only sound was the distant thrum of goats waking to their own tired habits. But there, standing silent in the middle of the clinic's front steps, not sniffing, not pacing, just ... watching was a dog. Dr. Yara Mabel had come early. She always did. The others assumed it was because she was efficient. But the truth was quieter. Mornings hurt less. The clinic walls hadn't had time to echo yet, and she could wash her hands, without anyone watching the way she lingered around the wrist, where the tattoo of a name had once meant something. She didn't notice the dog at first, not until she unlocked the metal door, pushed it open, and turned to prop it with her hip. Then she paused. He was motionless, not begging, not barking, just watching her. His coat wasn't quite wild, but it wasn't clean either, the rough color of damp bark, streaked in places with the dust of road or veldt. His ears stood high but relaxed, like a question not yet asked, and his eyes not frightened, not challenging, just oddly fixed. Familiar, even. She bent slightly, not to call him, just to understand the shape of him better. Half dog, half something else. Shepherd in build maybe, or a village mutt born lucky in the hips. But there was no collar, no tag, and as the wind shifted soft, dry, carrying the faint mineral scent of rising heat, she realized he smelled of nowhere, not of people, not of forest. He smelled like distance. "Go on," she said gently, but without warmth. The dog blinked once, then stepped forward and entered the clinic on his own. Yara straightened. There was a moment, brief and tight, where her body wanted to stop him, but her hands didn't move. The dog padded across the tiled reception floor and sat, deliberately, beside the cracked water cooler. She didn't speak again, just closed the door behind her. By midday, everyone in the settlement knew, not because Yara had told them. She never spoke about animals that arrived like this without a reason. But word moved, as it does in small places, fast and without clear origin. The dog had a name, people said, a human name, not one given in jest or love, but the kind that seemed borrowed from a birth record. One of the volunteers claimed to have whispered it under her breath and watched him turn his head. "David," she had said. "His name is David." Kojo arrived after lunch. He hadn't meant to stop by. But when you've walked the land for 30 years, you notice when the silence around a place grows thick. The clinic had gone quiet in the wrong way, not the calm of healing, but the hush of breath being held. Kojo had seen drought twist animals into strange behaviors. He had seen buffalo abandon their calves, hyenas wait beside fences like mourners. But never this. A dog alone, seated beside the cooler like a patient waiting for a call that wouldn't come. He didn't speak as he stepped inside. He simply removed his hat. The dog did not move. But when Kojo stepped to the right, just slightly, just enough to put himself in the line of a dog's stare, he felt it, that something was being measured. "Wade, you're not wild," Kojo murmured, "but you're not tame either." Yara had been watching from the side room. She came forward slowly, wiping her hands on a towel, the edge of her shirt already streaked with iodine and sweat. "He walked in at dawn," she said softly, sat down like he'd been here before. Kojo crouched, one knee cracking, his body groaning like an old tree in wind. The dog tilted his head but did not lean away. "What does he want?" Kojo asked, more to the air than to Yara. "I think he wants us to remember something," she said. The afternoon passed with the dog, unmoving. Patients came and went, goats with abscesses, a lamb too weak to stand. Children peeked around the doorframe whispering his name like a spell. "David," they'd breathe. "He's still there." But by sunset something changed. The light, slanted and low, thick with gold and heat haze, shadows spilled sideways like old regrets. A storm was teasing the horizon, not near, but loud enough to make the leaves fidget. And the dog rose. Not slowly, not dramatically, just stood and walked to the far wall of the clinic, where the shelves of medicine ended and a narrow storage room waited beyond a beaded curtain. Yara followed. Not quickly. The curtain swayed once, and stilled. Inside the storage room, the dog had stopped again. He was staring at a low drawer. One Yara had not opened in months, a drawer that still bore a strip of faded tape, the name barely visible now. "Patient file, David K. Mather." Kojo stood in the doorway behind her. He had not followed, but he had known. The old man's voice was the only thing in the room, not holding its breath. "That name," he said quietly, "was your brother, wasn't it?" Yara said nothing. She just looked at the dog, whose ears had lowered now, not in fear, but in something quieter. Recognition, maybe, or grief. And then, before either of them could move, the dog lay down, not curled, not anxious. He lay as if settling into memory, as if waiting for something to begin again. Yara stepped closer. She reached out, hesitated, then opened the drawer. It wasn't empty, it never had been. Outside, the storm finally began to speak. A low, distant growl, just enough to remind the hills that something was coming. And in the dim clinic light, with the wind rising and the dog unmoving, Dr. Yara Mel placed one hand on the file and felt the weight of a story she had never Told begin to stir. The drawer didn't creak. It opened with the silence of something long avoided. Yara didn't lift the file. She just stared at the top page, faded handwriting, smudged with the oil of years, still bearing her brother's name. David K. Mbatha, date of admission, September 8, age 29. Prognosis, guarded notes, unusual symptoms, unexplained aggression alternating with catatonia, no known cause. Behind her the dog didn't move. Kojo shifted just enough for the floor to complain under his boot. He didn't speak. His eyes were fixed on the dog's back, not tense, not wide with fear, just watching, as if still waiting for a decision to be made, or remembered. Outside, the wind had thickened, lifting dust into curls that skated across the road. A dry leaf scratched against the window pane like something trying to write from the other side. Yara reached into the drawer and touched the folder, nothing more. The paper was brittle. Beneath it, barely visible, was a photograph. She drew it out without looking at it. When she turned it over, she stilled. It wasn't one she remembered taking, but it was unmistakably from that time. David seated cross-legged, barefoot, a short-haired mutt curled beside him. The dog had his eyes closed, muzzle resting on David's ankle. His ears were back, relaxed, peaceful. The dog in the clinic now raised his head slowly. His gaze didn't meet hers, but drifted toward the edge of the photograph, as if he recognized something beyond what the human eye could see. Yara lowered the picture. "You've been here before," she whispered, but the room was already changing. A low whine buzzed in the lights overhead, the power flickering, unstable. Outside, a single crow lifted from the roof, circled once, then vanished toward the hills. And still, the dog stayed. Yara moved past Kojo into the hallway. The air smelled faintly of ozone, not rain yet, but something old and electric. She went to the cabinet near the sink, unlocked it. Inside were vials, mostly painkillers and vaccines, but tucked in back was a strip of older ampules, sedatives, rarely used, mostly expired. She took one, more out of instinct than plan. Kojo stepped beside her. His voice was gentle, but not soft. "You think he came back for the same thing?" Yara shook her head slowly. "No, I think he came back to finish something." That night, the dog disappeared. No one saw him leave. The back door remained locked. The front showed no scratch marks, no paw prints in the soft dust that had settled after dark. The night guard, a boy not more than 16, swore he'd checked every hour. "He was just gone," he said, like a dream that forgot to end. But 2 days later, on the southern edge of the old cattle road, Kojo found something. It was early, before even the guinea fowl had begun their chatter, and the air still held the cold weight of moonlight. He had taken his usual route, the one that looped around the dry riverbed, past the baobab that split in two after the last lightning storm. That's where he saw them. Dog tracks, deep, deliberate, leading away from the main road and down into the gully. But beside them, strange depressions, not bootprints, not hoofs, just ... Wait, as if something had walked there without shape or without form we could understand. Kojo followed, of course, not out of duty, but from that old instinct, the one that knows when something isn't right, even if it hasn't yet gone wrong. He reached the base of the gully. The dry earth had cracked like glass. A lone acacia bent there, its bark stripped low by porcupines or time. And beneath it, in the center of an old fire ring, was the file. David's file that it hadn't blown there. No, the folder was too clean. No dust, no weathering. Placed deliberately, Kojo bent, lifted it, and turned the cover inside. The photo was gone. In its place was a single object, a plastic collar tag, blue faded, the metal ring rusted at the edge, the name etched on it. David. Kojo didn't move. He simply looked up, eyes sweeping the dry horizon. Far off, too far to name. Something barked once, and then silence. But the air had shifted, not in temperature, in pressure, in feeling, as if the land itself had inhaled. He stood, collar tag in hand, and began the walk back. Behind him, the wind pressed low through the gully, stirring loose ash into faint spirals. The shape of something once burning. The shape of something not yet done. The file stayed closed on the table for hours. Yara hadn't moved it since that moment, hadn't spoken the name aloud either. But it lay there like something breathing, not dramatic, just present. Every so often the wind teased the papers beneath it, lifting a corner as if waiting for permission to reveal more. She ignored it mostly, but Kojo saw the way her hands flexed when she thought no one was watching. How she reached for it and stopped, just shy. Fingers hovering in the space between memory and movement. The dog, David, if that truly was his, hadn't shifted from the corner. His body was long now, stretched toward the base of the filing shelf, nose tucked beneath his front paws. He wasn't asleep, not quite, but his eyes were half-lidded in a way that suggested he wasn't entirely here either, like he was listening to something no one else could hear. By late afternoon the clouds had begun to stack inland, layer upon slow building layer. There was no rain yet, but the pressure had changed. Kojo felt it in his knees, the kind of weight that settled across the bush before a storm, not rushing in, but curling its fingers around the edge of the horizon. When the phone rang, Yara didn't answer it. She didn't even look at it. She simply stood and walked outside. Kojo followed, not out of concern but because something in the air had shifted again, a new absence. The birds, he realized, had gone quiet. Outside, the sun was still low but thick, orange muffled behind that building storm, and standing by the edge of the clinic's fence where the dry scrub gave way to a narrow animal path was a second figure. Dot, another dog. No, Dot, not a dog, not quite. This one was larger, coarser, scar over the left flank, and posture wrong. Not uncertain like David, not observing. This one was angled forward, stiff-legged and alert. Not threatening yet, but not curious either. The air between them felt taut. David rose slowly from inside. Yara turned just in time to see him step into the light. His gait was calm but deliberate, each footfall precise. As he neared the gate, the other dog took a single step back, then stopped. It didn't growl, it didn't blink, but something passed between them, something invisible but unmistakable, recognition or rivalry. Kojo spoke softly now. That one ... not wild either. Yara didn't respond. Her eyes were locked on David's posture. It had changed. His tail was neither raised nor lowered. It hovered in a level line. Not challenge, not fear. Assertion, a memory, maybe of authority. Then, for just a second, David looked back at her, not dramatically, not for confirmation, but like someone remembering which door they had left through last. Then he stepped beyond the fence. The other dog turned and walked into the bush without a sound. David followed. Kojo's hand gripped the gate. Should we? No, Yara said. Not because she believed it was safe, but because something older, quieter, had rooted her. She didn't understand what was unfolding, but she knew interruption would fracture it. Some stories demanded to be witnessed, not controlled. Inside the clinic, the file still lay undisturbed. That night, wind pushed against the clinic windows, soft, persistent. Yara didn't sleep. She sat in the corner chair, the one facing the door, her eyes adjusting to the dark. Outside, things moved, always had. Small mammals maybe. Insects, leaves shifting across corrugated roofs. But her ears stayed tuned for only one sound. Pause. They never came. But when the first light cracked the edge of the sky, Kojo returned. He had walked the southern track in silence, not hoping to find the dog, but hoping to find the shape of what might come next. He carried something in his hand, a cloth, folded once. Inside it, a small wooden tag, old, splintered, the edges smoothed by age or handling. Kojo laid it on the table beside the file. Carved into the wood, uneven but legible, were 2 letters. DK. Kojo didn't ask. He just looked at her once, then at the door. It was tied to a thorn bush, he said quietly. The same trail he followed. Yara stared at it for a long time. The wind had gone still again. Not calm, just holding its breath. She reached forward, not to open the file, not yet, but to place the tag gently on top of it. Then finally, she whispered something. Not a prayer, not a name, just a single word. Why? But outside the clinic, the land had already moved on, and deep within the brush, unseen by human eyes, a figure watched from the tree line. Not the large dog from before, but something smaller, younger. It didn't step forward. Not yet, but it didn't turn away either. The storm had passed, but it had left the world quieter than before, not refreshed, not cleansed, just quiet, like something had broken beneath the surface and refused to be named. The clinic's metal door creaked against the frame, stirred by a breeze that carried the brittle scent of scorched earth and damp that hadn't soaked in. David, the dog with the human name, hadn't moved from the back room. He lay facing the now empty drawer, chin resting between his paws, eyes open but not alert, as if waiting, not for danger, but for meaning. Yara hadn't left the building. All day she'd cancelled the afternoon patients, said nothing about why. Instead, she'd swept the reception floor twice, paused each time by the same dusty footprint just inside the threshold. Not the dog's. It was smaller, a child's, maybe, but no children had come in barefoot that week. Kojo had returned before dusk, not because he was needed but because he hadn't been able to stop thinking about the way David had looked at that file. Not like an animal, not like a ghost either, like something in between. He didn't ask questions this time. He just sat on the step outside, hat over his knees, watching the wind change direction. Inside, Yara stood beside the sink, hands idle over a bowl of untouched water, her gaze fixed on the dog, unmoving until something shifted. David's ears rose, not high, just enough to register sound. Then came the faintest pressure in the air, a low vibration, more felt in the chest than heard, a vehicle but not one from the village. The ranger stood. Yara met his glance, not with surprise, but with a kind of resignation. He nodded once, then stepped down the path, following the direction of the sound. When Kojo reached the ridge, the vehicle was already there, an old mining truck, its body coated in ochre dust. It wasn't moving fast, but it wasn't slow either, and it wasn't local. The driver was careful, unfamiliar with the terrain, the kind of man who scanned the trees not out of habit, but out of caution. Kojo didn't wave. He just stood in the open until the truck slowed to a crawl. A window cranked halfway. The driver, lean, sunburnt, hesitant, looked out. "You're on private trail," Kojo said flatly. "I'm looking for a dog," the man replied, voice dry. "American, or something like a dog." Kojo didn't answer. The silence lengthened. The man continued, faltering. "It's strange. We rescued him a year ago. If it's him from a flood zone near Sumeb. He was already named David. It was written in marker on his flank. Just that David." Kojo stepped forward, not hostile, just steady. "And you lost him 6 months ago. One morning he was gone. No sign of struggle, no open gates. Like he walked out knowing where to go." Back at the clinic, David rose, slowly, like a ripple in sleep. Then he walked out the door and stood facing the horizon, not the ridge where Kojo had gone, but west, toward the deeper bush. His tail didn't move. His body was still, but Yara saw something shift in his posture, not fear, not eagerness, recognition, and something like refusal. Kojo returned a while later, said nothing about the truck. The vehicle had turned around without passing, but his eyes were different, not puzzled, disturbed, in a quiet, personal way. "The man knew things," he said. Said David had been in fires, floods, shelters. He always left before the second storm. Yara looked at the dog, who hadn't turned away from the horizon. "Maybe he doesn't belong to anyone," she said. "Maybe he's just what's left." That night, the dog refused to sleep inside. He lay just beyond the clinic porch, where the first rain had carved new channels in the earth. His head rested on one paw, but his eyes never fully closed. Yara watched from the doorway for a long time before returning to her cot. Just before dawn, something woke her. Not a noise, the absence of one. She stepped outside barefoot, the air cool against her skin. The dog was gone. She walked to the end of the porch and looked down. His prints were there, leading west, into the thick brush. She followed them a few steps. Then she saw it, not far beyond the fence. In the shadow of the mopane trees, lay a small, weathered collar, old leather, worn through at the buckle. And next to it, just barely visible in the half-light, the imprint of 2 front paws, and 2 smaller ones beside them. Not childlike, canine. Fresh, Yara, did not touch the collar. She stood very still somewhere. In the distance, birds scattered suddenly from the canopy. No sound had triggered it. Just a ripple through the land, as if something had passed. The sky was beginning to pale, but the light felt thinner than it should have been. Yara looked into the trees one last time, and this time she didn't feel alone. The collar still lay where she'd found it, half buried in loam, its cracked leather worn pale by years of sun and silence. A strip of dried grass curled around the buckle, as if the earth had been trying gently to take it back. Yara didn't reach for it. She just stood, bare feet pressing into damp soil, watching the space beyond the fence where the underbrush thickened and then gave way to nothing. The early light was thin, colorless, as if the day itself had not yet decided to begin. A bird stirred high in the canopy, then stopped. No calls, no wind, only the tension of absence, of something just beyond the line of sight. Behind her, the clinic door creaked softly. Kojo had come outside but said nothing. He didn't walk toward her. He only watched from the wooden stoop, hands resting on his knees like an old prayer, eyes narrowed in the direction she stared. There were no tracks now. The dew had smudged them, and whatever had moved through the night had done so with purpose. No circles, no signs of distress, just one direction. The sun broke the horizon slowly. Light touched the edge of the collar, and for a moment it gleamed. Then Yara stepped back, not retreating, letting go. She turned and walked toward the clinic, passing Kojo without a word. He didn't stop her. He simply rose once she was gone and walked the short distance to the collar. He knelt beside it, not to pick it up, but to press one hand gently into the soil beside it. His fingers sank until they met the old, damp roots. Then he stood and left it there. Later that morning, villagers came again, not because of the dog, but because they always did. Goats still limped. Chickens still coughed. Life continued the way it always had, refusing to pause for the things it couldn't name. The children asked where David had gone. Yara only smiled softly and tapped her chest once, then pointed west. No one tried to follow. Days passed, then a week. Rain came again, hard and fast. It cleared the dust from the air and pounded new paths through the hard earth, turning memory into mud. The collar vanished beneath it. Whether carried by water or buried by time, no one knew. No one went to look. Kojo returned to his patrols. The bush was greener now, but more restless. Herds moved differently. Paths shifted. He saw signs not of David, but of something like him. Places where the silence had weight, where birds watched instead of fled, where nothing had quite left, but nothing could quite stay. One morning, just before dawn, Yara found something on the clinic steps. Not alive, not broken, just placed. A feather black, curved, perfect, sitting upright in a small, shallow dent in the wood. Balanced in a way no wind could have left it. She picked it up slowly, turned it in her fingers, then set it on the sill above the door. She never mentioned it. Never asked Kojo if he'd seen anyone pass. She didn't need to. Months later, long after the talk had stopped, long after most had forgotten the dog with the human name, Kojo walked a high ridge in the west. The trees thinned there, and the ground was bare, cracked stone, scattered brush. Sky stretched too wide. At the edge of the cliff sat a shape he almost didn't see. Still, upright, watching the valley below. Not a dog. Not exactly. Kojo didn't call out. He didn't lift his hand or whistle or move. He only stopped and watched. The shape turned slightly, enough to glance back. The eyes held his for a long time. Then it rose and walked not down, but across the ridgeline, disappearing. Behind the boulders, Kojo stood there long after it was gone. The wind picked up again, dry and soft, the kind that lifts nothing but reminds you that something passed he didn't follow. Didn't need to. He turned back the way he came. And on the edge of the rock where the shape had been sitting, he saw them, faint, shallow, already fading, two paw prints side by side. And beside them, something smaller, not from this morning but not yet erased. He touched one with his thumb just once, then rose and kept walking. The ridge was empty now, but the sky behind him burned low and gold, as if the light was being carried west, following something old and quiet and still unfinished.